Tonight, in a special episode of the Greenhouse 4, the 7 jurors who have been eliminated so far will meet up to discuss the final 4. What lies are still believed? Who's in the lead? Who's still holding a grudge? Tonight's the night to air it all out. And finally, how will the jurors react to the gaggy elimination of Ross via Venus flytrap? It's the Jury Roundtable of the Greenhouse, Season 4.
So essentially, Christian and I will be leading this roundtable with all of you, our jury members, to go over the game, what has transpired up until this point, as well as evaluate the games of all of the remaining 5 players, one of which will hopefully be joining us at the end of this. We'll be able to see who the 5th place is, as well as kind of one last time evaluate our final 4 at that point, and then kind of evaluate and see what kind of questions we want to ask them as a jury and make sure we get some of the emotions out of the way. It's going to be a factor in your vote, and that's perfectly okay. Choosing a winner for the season, this is going to be the person that represents your season ultimately, and is the person that is going to be the face of the season whenever you look back, or people online look back. So we want it to be enjoyable, and someone that you truly believe is the best option for your season. So, Christian, do you want to start us off just kind of asking some general questions about the game? And we can go from there.
All right. So generically, this game got quite emotional for a few of you guys, especially because y'all seem like a very close-knit group for the most part. Do you feel like that is driving a major factor in who you're looking at as a winner as we approach the end? We could start by Seth.
No, not really.
No? Why is that?
I just feel like someone played a really good game, and I'll respect that.
So you would value game over emotion?
Naturally, of course, it's a game.
Okay. All right.
And we don't have to go one at a time. This can just be a general conversation as well. If you feel strongly about something, feel free to speak up. We would just ask that each of you talk at some point. That way you're making an impact on this episode and the jury as a whole, because your opinion is important, regardless of whether you feel like your voice is loud enough or if it is coinciding with someone else on the jury. That's perfectly okay, but we want to hear your opinions to make sure everyone kind of gets their say and gets their opinion out. Does anyone else have an opinion on kind of the emotional aspect of today and yesterday?
I mean, as the chronic crier, I can speak. It was definitely emotional for me, but that's not really shaping my decision, because even if it stung personally, I respect the gameplay, so I agree it's more about game than emotions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the fact that we're all here means that someone that we trusted kind of, backstabbed us, but that is smart for their game, so I do respect it at the end of the day.
But I do think there is a good and a not necessarily bad, but less good way to go about that, in terms of how friendly did you make our relationship, how close did you think that we were, and then to kind of spin that around. Like, I think there is a way to do it that is kind of respectful. I mean, that's something that we had kind of talked about previously. So I think there's kind of like a respectful way to backstab and play the game, and then kind of a more underhanded way.
Yeah. Adding to that, who having to break the relationship off. That's important to note how they broke it off, because either did they tell you, Caleb, you're going home, or did they just not tell you at all and just leave you to figure it out yourself? Mm-hmm. I respect being even though I would not like to not go home, I'd rather know I'm going home than be blindsided at the very end and then have to ask, just beg, be how did this happen? But I feel all of us are like that, because I said we all really were a very close knit group, and so yeah, basically, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I understand what you're saying, and we all felt really, really bad about your vote. But it was just very difficult to look someone in the eye and say that we're voting you out. That would just make the whole voting process a little bit awkward and tense. So I think our way of saying that was Ross telling you that you should bid on up here. Yeah. I know that wasn't very clear, but that was his way of telling you.
Yeah.
So this brings up, in my opinion, a very good question that I don't know if you all have considered, but where do you draw the line then between hurting a friendship and a relationship that you formed inside the game versus jury management? And that does play a factor, because making sure you don't cross the line, and Anthony talked about it a little bit, doing it in a certain way does make a difference in how it's interpreted and felt ultimately by each of you. Is there anyone in the game who you feel is doing a really good job in how they're going about this? You said that everyone in the game, given we are here, you've been stabbed in the back by someone you trusted at some point, or you were the last one. But honestly, even if you're the last one, there's someone you trust in the game still. There always will be. So how does that play a factor, and what's the difference in determining where you draw the line on that?
For me, Gavin voted against me, which was a shock because he was on my little ally team, but he was so respectful about it. He just look in his eye when he came back from voting, I kind of knew that he had voted me out, but afterwards he came up, he gave me a hug. He was nothing but nice to me the entire game, and I know that he knew I was going home, so he would rather be on the right side of the voting, so I respect that. I think that Gavin never made me feel like it was a target vote.
Gavin was the exact same way with me. Like Gavin was really like the first person to tell me they're voting me out, and I respect that the most because he's like, he could have just like let it happen and just leave me in the dark, but he didn't. And plus, the also in fact, like especially at the beginning of the game, Outcast buddies, like from then on, I was like, this is my guy. Like I literally, like I feel the best with him. We've been through it basically, and so if I get honored that, it's great. Like I feel like Gavin is a very good social player.
Yeah.
At least from my perspective, I don't know about y'all, but for me, from what I've seen, he's a very good social player. And in fact, that like he's still here without getting a single vote against him, despite being on the block. I found 6.
Yeah.
6 or 7? Was it 6 or 7? No, it was against.
It was me. It was
yeah, final 7. Yeah, like because like you haven't been on the block yet, and you've been on the block, and you still didn't see the official vote. Impressive.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I do think though, Kelby is the other strongest social player in the game right now, because she is someone who, she had power very early on, never really kind of did after that, maybe once or twice, but I felt like she has not made waves, has not made necessarily big moves or flashy moves, but has very much kind of worked under the radar, but from what I've learned, has really been in those conversations that she needs to be in. And also, like, I had nothing but love for Kelby throughout the game, still do, but you know, I never once questioned where we were at, and then all of a sudden, here I am. So, you know, I do think she is really playing the strongest social game that's
I
left.
do want to know though what else she did as a big move, because you can play a good social game, you can run it, but what else did you do? And I feel like she has not done enough to put herself out there and gain votes.
I mean, I'll just give the perspective of what just happened and why I got voted out. So essentially, like, I agree that Kelby is a phenomenal player because she is the person that burned me the hardest in the most respectful way. In the sense that, like, pretty early on, I felt like I had a pretty good alliance with her. I mean, John Michael, Kelby, and Seth and I, we were like, we're Final Four, and I think the 3 of us felt pretty good about that, and we felt like that was going to happen. And then before Seth went out, we could feel Kelby teetering, but I still was like, oh, she just feels bad because she likes both of the nominees. But then I find out afterwards that she's been working with this final group since the very beginning, and that they had a whole plan, and she came to me right before banishments for John Michael and told me, you are the next target. She was like, I just want to be honest with you. Like, she has played an honest game while at the same time playing people so hard.
So does that game style where you find out later in the game that someone had an alliance that you had no idea about, you felt you were super close to this person, does that help them and make it less egregious that they turned on you? Or in your opinion, does that make it more egregious that, hey, this person was able to con me the entire game? How do you feel about that?
For me, with Kelby specifically, because she was so honest with me right before I was gone, essentially, to me, that makes me like her play better. And I know, like, it's not a dirty play, and for some people it's probably a weak play and an easy play, but to me it makes me respect her more because it seems very strategic. I'm not going to say calculated, but very strategic. I think she knows what she's doing.
I want to know if she led the pack though, because I don't know if she rode everybody's coattails or whatever you call it to get there, and that
Yeah.
If you just floated your way to the top because you were comfortable, then that's not showing that you played the game well. That's my opinion. But
I do want to speak on that because I at least thought I was a part of that major group. So the original group started in round 1. I believe Brock and Steph made it, but Cubby was also in the greenhouse. She was the Tulip, so she was just there as well. So it was the people in the greenhouse, those 3, the purple team, which was Ross, Kim, and Dylan, and then the 2 outcasts, myself and Gavin, and that was like the original 8. And so I think from there, that's where they got the little core group.
did she make any decisions though?
Seth, can you speak on that?
Oh yeah, 'cause you were in it, yeah.
I mean, I feel almost disagree with her playing an honest game. She really conned me and deceived me pretty significantly. From the jump, I mean, when we were 3 with Brock, she was very intent on us having each other's back throughout the game, no matter what. And actually, it was a super difficult decision when it came down to Ava, and I mean, even through all the footage, like I've said it time and time again in many different conversations, you and her were, number ones, and I was gonna do anything I could to do that, and I felt that I stuck with that very well, and she did not whatsoever, and yeah, I mean, while I have to agree with John Michael too, I do feel as though she kind of rode that coattail. She allowed the power that we kind of had with our group. She rode with that, but at the same time, didn't make any significant plays either way, and just kind of looped herself in with them, while at the same time making an appearance that she was really loyal and dedicated. And in my experience, it was a huge backstab and very deceptive and dishonest. But yeah.
But is anybody that's left over, have any of them made strong plays, or have they just had the numbers?
I would say Kim has made strong plays.
I think Kim has
Yeah.
made. I think Dylan as well has played a fantastic game. So
Yeah, I also say with Dylan, because he was someone that I was working with the whole game, and never did I find out he was a part of that 5 until after I was gone. Because that round, he told me like, "Hey, I'm Rose. I'm not putting you up. Like you were safe with me." And then when I talked to Gavin, he was like, "Yeah, we're kind of thinking of meeting him and Dylan. They're like, yeah, we've talked about maybe putting you up." So, to Gavin's credit, he told me, but I was like, "Oh well." Dylan's just like kind of playing it up to like kind of make it happen. But now looking back on it, it's like, no, you wanted me gone eventually. You just didn't want to tell me. So it stings, and I don't know, it makes me question some of the other conversations we've had just throughout the game and kind of where loyalty was throughout the whole game.
Yeah, I kind of feel like that's the case for all of us, that we did feel deceived because people were unwilling to tell us that we were going. But also I do understand why.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a way to do it, in the way Anthony said it, and in some of the conversations we had with Caleb, or telling someone, we not exactly sure what's gonna happen, while being very direct and telling someone that you're about to vote for them is, that's just not. That's a lot more difficult and hard to ask for. However, being ambiguous is a lot better of a way to go about it than lying and just directly, not being honest about it. So with Kim, in my example, I respect her move very well because I got out off of banked votes that she had contributed to an understanding of banked votes that I would be fine, and then Kim never said specifically, though, it was smart, that it was for me or against me, whatever. And that's where the deception with Kelby, I feel, came, because that was all in an agreement, and after we collected and I rounded up the banked votes for myself, it was all in. It was. I could have chosen another person. I could have chosen Ruby or John Michael or whoever to put those tokens in those hands, and it could have went differently. But I trusted her the most, and she took that trust and allowed it to get in good with the other group. And I felt that Kim made a real powerful play there. But yeah.
So with that, what happened with you and who was it? Dylan? Who were you against? Dylan. So Dylan like flat out sat me down and asked me who I was going to
Just
vote
Bush.
for. And I flat out told him I was going to save you. And I said I had to do that because I felt like we had been loyal to each other. And so I told him straight up, I'm voting for you. Like, you're gonna, like, if it was my way, Seth is staying. And I feel like that's the reason I then went home 2 rounds later, because I was very clearly in the minority the next round. And so I definitely think you can't play this game 100% honestly at all, because it will come back to bite you.
I think Kim is someone who has kind of went under the radar the first few rounds and accumulated so much power. Like, by the time she finally got to vote, she had 3 banked votes and her regular vote, plus she had that pollinator and she had a bunch of seeds, and she was all over the place in a bunch of conversations. And part of me was always like, I really trust Kim, but also, Kim, what are you doing? Because she had all this power and held her cards so close to her chest in terms of what she was going to do with it. And I think that is something that's really benefited her in the last half of the game, where she was able to really execute a lot of the power that she had to get herself further.
Yeah. I didn't realize, though, that they used the votes you gave them to vote for you. That's what happened, right?
Kelby used the vote that you gave her. She voted to save you because you had 3 votes. That was my vote, John Michael's banked vote, and then your banked vote that Kelby used. Kelby used her personal vote, and she also had, I think, Dylan's banked vote.
Also, Kim's banked vote.
Yes. She had, yeah. So she put your vote that you gave her to save you, but used her personal votes against you.
So y'all kind of touched a little bit on this, but there are a lot of different gameplays that the finalists have employed, and they are very different in their own way, right? So what do you see as more of a winning gameplay when you look at the finalists? We touched on floating, maybe, versus more in-your-face gameplay by getting a lot of power. What do y'all see in your perception of a winning player?
I see a mastermind. I like someone who I truly believe deserves to win just because they fought so hard. Someone who's been pulling strings but also plays a very nice social game.
I agree. Can I use a player as an example?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, like, I imagine, like, okay, so Kim voted me out, and Kim was against me in another alliance, but she has made good gameplays to make good relationships with people. So when I was on the block the second time, and I needed 3 more seeds to be uprooted, I said, can you give me the seeds? And she gave me all 3 of the seeds. So I think that was a good gameplay on her part, because she wins competition, she has all the seeds, she has the pollinator, and she's still willing to use it on somebody who's not her ally because she wants to make sure that she has a good relationship with other players, thinking about the end game. So
Yeah, I think the winner should be someone who has had that really good social game, but is also able to actually win the competitions.
yeah.
But not only win the competitions, because I think sometimes when players get power, you don't necessarily use that power to set yourself up for the future. And I think that when you have a flower power, when you have seeds or banked votes, someone who is able to use that to set themselves up for later rounds, that is someone who should be the winner.
So, kind of expanding on that a little bit, typically there are 3 major categories, I guess, that people look to when it comes to game, whether it be the strategic game, the social game, and then the physical or challenge-based game. But I think there's actually a 4th that plays a really big role in these games and actually is a very underlooked talent that a lot of players who end up making it to the end have, and that is the game of timing. Knowing when you are in trouble, when you are on the top, when to make a move and when not to make a move, even if you do or do not have power, I think plays a really big factor in how someone is able to execute the game and the style that they're trying to go about. So if y'all want to just kind of touch on each of the 4, who you think is doing well with each of those 4 different sections of the game and sectors, and then who you think out of the remaining cast has really struggled in one of those categories, and kind of, especially if one of them is at the absolute top of 1 or 2, but at the bottom of another, how does that compare, and how do you kind of create that gradient of, hey, they're really good in two of these categories, but this one's terrible? Do you overrule because you have two that are really good and one that's bad? Or do you kind of balance it out somewhere in the middle? What are y'all's thought processes around that?
In terms of timing, Kim, like we said, but also Gavin, Ross was kind of a wild card just for me, I guess. It was hard to tell what he was thinking a lot. And he would be the type to backstab you and like blindside you just for the sake of his own game, which, you know, like we said, is something that has to happen, but I don't know, he just seems so powerful.
I'm gonna second Gavin. Right, so since I knew I was going out, I knew there was nothing I could do to stop that. I knew that before nominations even went up, and so I accepted it. I went around to all of them, I said like, hey, no hard feelings, I get it, I'm going home. So I took that round, like the remaining players, we used that as like almost like a jury management type of thing of like, tell me what your game has been, what's your next move. Gavin told me that like they had the numbers to get the Venus flytrap for my round and keep me until the next one. But he knew there was no point in doing that if they could do it again the next round and have it be a bigger move. So I think he is very smart about timing. That just really showed to me that he knew what he was doing.
Yeah, going off of that, when I was trying to do the Venus flytrap, Gavin was one of my close allies, and I thought that he would just go along with it, but he actually stood up against me, which I really respect him for. He tried to talk me down. There was no talking me down at that point. But that was the first time that I really considered like, there is a time and place for everything. And maybe this is not, so.
And I think of the finalist, Dylan, I think is playing the most physical comp-based game.
Yep.
Yeah.
He keeps winning, and no one was ever really looking at him except for you. You were right the whole time. I'm playing. But like he just kept winning. He kept getting into the greenhouse, and no one seemed to care, which I do think is really impressive.
Yeah. So why do you think that he kind of like flew under the radar?
I think because they're just bigger fish to fry every time.
Yeah. So does that mean like you wouldn't consider Dylan as someone who is super like pulling a lot of strings?
I think he is.
I think he is because he's had the power to do so.
Yeah, like almost every single round, like every other round, he's in the greenhouse. Like, I remember, I think when I got on jury, or like right before that, like there was like a stretch of like 3 rounds he was in the greenhouse every single time. I'm like, he's a roast again. Now I'm sitting there like confused. I'm like, did we have a ceremony already? How is he the roast 2 times in a row? So it was like really interesting. Picture my perspective. So the fact like he, at least for the Victoria round, how he almost went home at some point. The fact that he went 3 straight rounds winning power, and then like no one seemed to care. Like, how do you go from almost being a target to literally being at the top, or really like being like under the radar again? Like that was mad impressive to me. So
I'll say I didn't care because I was working with him. So
fair,
I was like,
fair.
if you're good, I'm good. We're going. But
Yeah.
It also seemed like every time he went up on the block, he was never like a target.
Yeah.
Like even when he went up, he wasn't necessarily a pawn. It was more of like he was an easy choice. Whereas there were people who went up who greenhouse members were like, I want this person gone. That's why we're putting them up. They were clear targets. Dylan never was. He just happened to be on the block.
So we touched a lot on Dylan. So what do y'all think justifies you to vote for Dylan as a winner? What does Dylan need to do to get to the end and get your vote? Does he need to do anything else?
At this moment, I really do respect the game he's played, because in terms of, I was fooled the whole time of being together, and then he was really winning those comps. I need to know, was it intentional? I need to know, was this the plan? Was this like thought out, or did it just kind of happen and now he's at the end? So I really think I need to hear his thought process, and I really would like to see, I'm curious how the next 2 rounds play out, and what his explanation for that would be.
Yeah, so we really do have a cast of 5 really strong players here at the end, and I think you have all verbalized the fact that each of them have strengths and weaknesses that have played into the reason that they're there, quite frankly, and all of you are not, because in one way or the other they played a great game, that got them there.
Is Taylor?
He is not.
He's not.
So, going off of that, one thing that was mentioned earlier, and it was talked about the first round, each of you got split up into teams in that very first round. Who was on what teams? If you were on the gray team, real quick. Okay, and was Seth on your team or no?
Victoria.
Victoria.
No, not Victoria, Jessica.
Oh my god,
Jessica.
someone
Okay.
else to me.
What other teams were there? I don't remember the colors.
We were on green with Victoria.
Okay.
And I was not chosen for it.
Not
You were not
chosen.
chosen.
And
I
Seth
believe
was on
Seth-
red.
Red.
Seth was on red. So the one I have not heard is purple.
Mhm.
And I think that's because every member of purple is still in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ross Kim and Dylan.
Do you think that those original teams and forming those bonds, even if it's a simple challenge, something that is so early, do you think that's played a role in your games individually before you were out, and also the games that all of the remaining players still are in? And how did those two that are not a part of that purple team, how do you think they were able to make the inroads into that group, if that was indeed an alliance that was made early?
For me, for the first challenge that we had, I wanted to feel it out before I made alliances straight away. Because I didn't want to throw myself into an alliance that was going to end up being weak. And I think that the three purple just got to game playing immediately, whereas I think a lot of other people kind of took their time a little bit. I mean, because in the first round, we were still having small talk conversations instead of game talk conversations.
Yeah.
And so now hearing that they were having game talk immediately, that's why they made it so far. With the other two, I think they just kind of got sucked in along the way to get the numbers.
I think that who you talked to the most had so much to do with who you wanted to vote for. Like, Anthony and I didn't get to talk as much,
Yeah.
and then that's why I was like, we should vote Anthony. So from the start, if you have like formed a connection with people and first impressions are also key, I think that they definitely like stuck together because they realized that they have like similar personalities, and they just continued that relationship.
I think the way the teams were picked also played a big role, because when Ruby was signed captain, Ruby was someone that like I really thought about would be a good person to work with. So when she picked me, I was like, okay, like, you know, there's some like reciprocating there. So then, I mean, obviously that really impacted our game because we worked together always at the bitter end. But yeah, I think Kelby may have been able to get in with the purple because of the power she had at the beginning. Whereas I think Seth and Brock were a little more volatile of the three in the greenhouse at the first round. I don't know how Gavin got there, but
I think
good for him.
Yeah, so
Do you
Gavin and I got there because we were the two people who were on the team,
right,
and it was just like a numbers thing.
Gotcha,
Like
okay.
it was the people in the greenhouse for the team, and then us two was like,
yeah.
just 14 of us, might as well get 8. Then also they were like, oh, we like your vibe a lot. So I was like, I'm going to block, I'm fine. So I was chilling, and I went to Lions. So that's how we got roped in. But I do admit that also like the way it kind of formed was very like circumstance. Because like I said, it was really just make sure you have numbers and start a game. So it wasn't really. They lost like at least at least the way I saw it. It was mainly a Seth and Brock decision. Now I don't know what Kelby had to do with it, but like I just knew that Seth and Brock were like this, so I figured that since they were majority 2 out of 3, I was like, okay, it's probably their decision to throw us in there. So, but yeah, I definitely agree that like that group, however many different combinations they had, definitely ran the game. I just happened to be outside of said group, which makes sense because I was overall not picked from the start. So it does make sense how it formed and how it like rode up to this point. Because I mean, shoot, the 5 are still in the game, about to be 4. But like, yeah.
I'll also say with the purple, sorry, last thing with the purple,
Oh, you're good.
they made it really seem like they were not working together. Because there's points where I'd have a conversation with Ross and he was like, Kim could be doing literally anything.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, word. And then there were points where Dylan, I barely ever saw Dylan in a conversation with either of them. So I think that is really part of it. No one suspected it because it was like not there. Like it wasn't something to see.
Yeah.
Right.
I think Gavin did a phenomenal job of floating under the radar for the majority of this game until the very end. That's when he stuck out, I think, as a competitor. And so that's what I think, for me, that's why I never even like put a second thought for him. I don't really have any weaknesses for him, and that's mostly because I did not work much with him throughout the game, so I didn't really see how he played other than short conversations I had with him and like nominations and stuff like that. So I can't really say.
Yeah. So earlier you mentioned this about timing, and I actually mentioned it in my pre-game interview, talking about like it's good to know like what moves to make, but you have to know when to do it, if to do it at all. And like I believe you mentioned it, or like when you mentioned it, but like Gavin has the gift of timing. Like everything he did, there was a reason to do it, and there was a time to do it. Because like I think it was the fly trap. You talking? Yeah, it was fly trap. When they wanted to do it, he did it. He was like, "That's not a good time to do it," because it wasn't, and that was a good time to get you out. so like he knew it was like, this is not the time to do it. Yeah, it's not good for my game to do it, so I'm not gonna let it happen. And so, but then when it's beneficial to him, he did the dang thing. So. Props to that.
Yeah, going off of that, he's so incredibly strategic, and I feel like he was always thinking 10 steps ahead, but also if he would make like a 10-step plan, he'd be like, well, what if this changes? He would kind of create a plan for each option, and I gotta give it to him, like that's amazing.
Alright, go Michael.
I'm kind of on the board with Elliot. I have nothing negative to say about him. I truly think, like we say, he's ruthless, but at the same time, he's so sweet. He's so kind, and
he's a nice boy.
he just kind of, it's a good little mask, because he's genuinely sweet. Like, it's not really a mask, but he gets a good game because he's just genuinely sweet, but he also makes really smart moves. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think his strength was his genuineness, because anytime I talked to him, I felt like I was being told the truth and being told what was happening, up to the point where it was, you're going up, and I was like, here we go. Negative, I don't really have a negative, but that is because I did not interact with him much in this game. So I barely saw him. I would go like 2-3 rounds and be like, Gavin, we're on the couch together, but I have not said 2 words to you. So I think I don't have a negative because I just didn't see enough of them.
Got it. Alright, let's go ahead and move on to Kim. We'll start in the middle with Ruby this time and then work our way around this way. That way everyone has some time to think.
In my opinion, I think that Kim was a really great strategic player. However, as someone who wasn't in the 5, I saw right through her, so I don't think her social abilities were great, and I could always tell when she was lying. And so the entire game I didn't trust her, and I think that was her weakness, because I would not have saved her in any situation because I could see through that she didn't have my back either. So I think she struggled with lying a little bit.
I would say that her strength is her strategy. I mean, she collected so many different power-ups, and it was very smart the way that she put her bids on things. Her negative aspect would be that she kind of was just in the right room at the right time, and I feel like that's how she's this far in the game. Like, as nicely as I can put that. It could have gone...
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Continue, Ava.
It would have turned out a lot differently, I feel, if she had, not been in the room with y'all.
I would tend to agree with that. I think that Kim, I think she's super duper smart. I think that she knew a way to that her best game was going to be to float under the radar, and she also happened to just join up with people who were willing to kind of accept her in. I don't want to say she was replaceable. I would say she was probably the most replaceable out of the 5 of us that made it to the end. But at the end of the day, once again, I think she was a great player, and I think she played her game extremely well. Now, she wasn't really in the business of lying to me so much, so I don't know if her lying was good or bad, but I have nothing bad to say about Kim.
I think her biggest strength was she played her cards so close to her chest, while also being very open about what she had. She was saying, here's how many votes I got, here's the powers I got, here's my seeds. What she was going to do with them was literally anyone's guess. You may have had a better insight, but a lot of times I was like, who knows what she's going to do? And I do think that is a really good strength to be, because it really built a lot of trust, being like, hey, Kim's telling me what she has some faith in me. But still, really, she was the only one that knew what was going on. So I do think she played a really great game. I don't have anything negative to say about Kim's game. I think she did excellent this whole time.
I'm gonna piggyback off of you on that one. So yeah, I definitely think she played a really strong social game. Nobody really ended up targeting her, and she had so many advantages on her plate. And then she even felt comfortable enough not to use like the pollinator, for example, which I think is amazing because I don't know, I felt like I would have used it in a heartbeat if that was me. So for her to feel comfortable like that and still build relationships with everybody that was not in her main alliance shows me a lot about her gameplay. I think it was very strong and very strategic. So yeah.
Yeah. So, once again, I gotta reference y'all. So, what you said that like Kim was always in the room where something was happening.
Yeah.
Because like that's like a main part of the game that I particularly underestimated, and which I felt like what was part of my downfall. That like, yeah, I was close with people, but I was never where I needed to be at any given time. Like so whenever you told me why I was on the block particularly with the whole like trying to get the powers, I didn't see you, and I couldn't have helped you because I didn't see you. But like if you're like, so like this, I won't say just luck involved, because I will say with the round where I went home where we had to be in different rooms each time, there was some bit of like are you just there? So like, but other than that, well like the rest of the game, you had to actually go to the people, and you had to say where you would be at any given time. So the fact that Kim was able to find out where to be at every given moment to where she would never be a target, and always be a number, or be the power player in a sense. Also being able to get literally almost everything during the round at home. Like she got so much stuff. I was like, how did she get this, and this? And just like, I won't say nobody cared, but they were like, she has all this stuff, but I feel good with her. So it was like she just kept going, and now she's here at the Final Four.
Yeah.
She was always in the room where it happened, and that's the most important part to me.
After hearing that, I do think that my assumption is wrong about like it was just luck that she was in the right room at the right time. I retract that.
Alright, and then finally, let's go ahead, and Ross, we'll start with you to go around. Let's talk about Dylan's game and why he's here, the pros and cons, and then at the end, I'll let Christian lead trying to figure out our jury questions, because he tends to be better at that than I am.
Okay. I think Dylan is a great strategist. I think he and Gavin were probably the two best strategists in the game. He was always thinking, and also super smart. The last four of those people, super smart, all of them. And so I think Dylan was one of the probably two best strategists along with Gavin in the game. I think he was very loyal. I think to have a group of five that actually makes it to five is tough. I think Dylan, I'm not sure if he knew what was happening to me in this last one, but if he did, that's even more impressive because I didn't see it coming.
He knew.
That's good for him. So that's another pro. Guy can lie. Great game player, good strategist, good social game, good at having a poker face, and no negatives to say about that.
Yeah, I think that he's super, super nice. Said that about everyone, so I feel like it doesn't mean anything, but he's nice. He and I were paired up for the drawing challenge, so that's how we really got to know each other a bit. But for the most part, we were never working with each other. We never had many conversations, so I don't know a whole lot about his game. The one thing that I did have a problem with was after Gavin put him up on the block, I did not think that he was going home because like our target was Victoria, and I kept telling him that, but he still was taking it personally and saying, I'm going for Gavin next. And like I heard that he was trying to go for me next because, I was the sunflower that round too. So that's the only negative thing I can say.
Yeah. I think he was a phenomenal liar. He had me bamboozled the entire game. When I smashed my pot, I said, "This is for you, Dylan." So he's my enemy. However, I have nothing bad to say about him. I think he played a phenomenal game. I have nothing bad to say about him.
So for me, pro about Dylan's game was that he was really good at everything. Like competitions, like I think I said earlier, but I was on a jury and I was saying like he's in the greenhouse again, and I feel like personally like if he had a chance to win something, especially once the jury started, if he had a chance to win something, he did, because at least from my perspective, I felt like he was a greenhouse every other round, especially with Final 9 when you can't go in again once you're a flower. I felt like he was Final 9, Final 7, Final 5. So it was like, nah, I'm not sure about Final 5 because I wasn't there. But it's like, he just kept winning, and I'm like, okay, Tom Beast, look at you. Because that's the main source of power in this game, being able to nominate someone to have them be in trouble in the first place. So if you're able to dodge that bullet just by being immune, being able to nominate, then that's definitely that's literal power in the game. So the fact that he was able to get that so often and almost flawlessly is very impressive to me.
Oh yeah, he was like my arch enemy during the game. But he was, in all honesty, all around. The strategy, the comp wins, the everything. It was just, everything was so well planned out. I don't have anything negative to say about him because everything was just so good and so precise and thought out. So, yeah.
Yeah, I do think his ability to win. The only thing that I have question about is, the choices he was making in terms of was he planning, or was he just able to make the decisions because he was winning? Because I think there's a real difference between I have the power so I get to use it versus how do I make power moves without being in a greenhouse. And I think he is someone who was able to make powerful moves because he was there. I don't know how he would have fared if he was not in the greenhouse as much as he was.
Mm-hmm. All right. And real quick, I just want to add one more thing. One thing to remember is go into this with an open mind. Not saying that you cannot have someone in your head that you are favorited and rooting for and that you think your vote will go to, but don't lock in ahead of time. Let them be able to convince you a little bit, because there are parts of their game that none of you know, no matter how much you worked with them, against them, anywhere in between. Really, ultimately, the reason behind the moves they made is only something that they will know. So if they're able to explain that well and be able to prove to you that perhaps their game was intentional in this sense, be willing to hear it out. Doesn't mean it has to change your opinion. Ultimately, it is your vote and for your season's winner. But just take that into account. Don't really jade yourself from whatever they're offering at the table.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
Do you know what the rule, what does Taylor want? Are we supposed to judge what we think the best game that was played or the best jury performance? Who does the best in jury?
It is your choice.
It's each juror's choice.
It is your choice on how you want to grade and factor in all those different factors.
That's why it's so different for everybody.
Correct.
Gotcha.
It's the reason I lose every fucking game.
Couldn't be anything else, right? It couldn't be just Brody's not winning.
Maybe.
Alright, so now we get to the fun part. So each of you, when you're approaching
Do we need
the...
to record this part or no?
Might as well.
We can record it, we can always cut it
Yeah.
if Taylor doesn't want it.
Yeah. So fun part for y'all is y'all get to address the finalists. You can say whatever you want. Try to keep it concise, apart from your main question, right? We'll start with Anthony. You brought up a lot of calculations and you want to see how they calculated their game. Do you want to draft your question around that?
Yeah, I want to ask how much. Were you making the plans?
Yeah.
Were you making the plans, or were you told the plan?
Mm-hmm.
And when you were making the plans, how did you get to the plan you did, and what would you say was the most successful one and the biggest one?
I like that. So for John Michael, I know Brody said something.
Right.
It was the biggest move?
What's your biggest move? Yeah.
Okay. Are you okay with that one?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
yeah.
cool. Caleb, do you have anything that you specifically have planned to ask, or?
I would ask about particularly with the whole Final 5 deal y'all had. I want to know was that best for your game to go with that Final 5, or were there other outlets that you wanted to take advantage of that just didn't happen? And yeah, there's some time to ask around that, different additional questions.
That's a perfectly good question, because everyone that's still down there was
Yeah.
part of that Final 5,
Yeah.
so yeah, by all means.
Yeah, what was their avenue? Was that their main avenue?
Yeah.
Plan going ahead. I like that. Ruby?
I kind of want to ask how much of their strategy revolved around lying.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Bullying people.
Love that one.
And then one thing I would add to that is ask them if they came in with the intention of lying. Not only did lying become a part of their game, because I think it's very different to come in with and start saying like I'm only going to tell the truth and telling everyone the truth and then start lying, versus coming in with a pre-thought notion of like, hey, lying is perfectly okay. This is a game. This is not personal. I would ask them to differentiate that, just so that they can then kind of sort through that in their own brains as well.
For me, I'm not exactly sure. I'm thinking something along the.
Oh, you're right. There's a vibe on it.
What?
Oh, eat outside?
Oh,
I said
better.
to go eat outside. I'm like, yeah.
It is quite nice
We're
outside.
gonna go eat outside, bro. I'm gonna take my time. Go ahead.
Ava somehow always gets interrupted by
And I lost my train of
My
thought.
fault.
What do you plan on asking?
Oh. I need help like developing this question, but at what point in the game did you kind of eliminate people? Like in your mind, you said, no, I don't want to work with them. Does that sound good?
I like
What
that.
was their timing with the cast on like who they were closer to? Does that kind of like mesh from it? Who they're like straying away from and how they wanted to see themselves getting to the end? Something like that?
I would go about saying it in a way of, at what point during the day did you rule out that this was another avenue for you? Kind of also touching on what Caleb was talking about.
Yeah.
But at what point did the other avenues that you had potentially formed and other alliances that you potentially formed, at what point did you realize that no matter how much I want to go with that person, it is no longer beneficial?
How about this? At what point did you create your various allies and get your various enemies? Is that worse than what you said?
Yeah.
Okay. Go with what he said. I'll go with fuck, marry, kill, me, Caleb, and Brody.
We're ruling that one out.
I was about to say, you would like remove the tension and ask it like
Easy.
If you can't ask an easy question, I would probably rule out fuck, marry, kill.
yeah.
Okay.
And also,
And if you do, don't add me in it. Don't add me
I'm
in
getting killed every fucking time, and I don't want to.
Kiss, marry, kill. Remove the F word again.
I was like, are you married?
Yeah, I'm married.
Yeah, that's what I do.
You could be you could be the guy that say something nice about each of the other ones.
That's what I'll do.
Say something nice, or say something terrible. It's
Yeah.
also fun.
No. We've had enough terrible over the last few years.
I'm a big fan of asking each of the finalists, I want you to tear apart their game.
Yeah.
And feel free to steal this but I will be saying, say something nice about your opponent in 30 seconds or less, because I think that the longer and I think things get repeated, and I'd rather this not be a 2-hour affair, and because they have what they're going to say to each of these questions, and we don't need to drag it over 90 minutes. So I'm going to say something nice about each of who's left. What do you think the best part of their game was, but in 30 seconds or less, and I will cut them off after 30 seconds.
Okay. Get a timer. Seth, what's your question?
Throughout the competition, what's been the most important focus for you?
I like it.
Yeah.
Perfect, simple. So I think we all have our questions.
We do.
We will coach up the final two who join us, and then I think we are ready to go downstairs and witness the last actual banishment.
Yeah, it's about that time.
And then after that, we'll have a quick jury. One thing just to remember, try to keep this jury session kind of short. I think you've all witnessed the games at this point. You've all stuck around for the vast majority of it. You may have missed one or two things here or there, but you know what's happening. You know the general idea, and really you're just asking them to prove their game one last time. So let's keep it. If we can keep it under an hour, that's like the ideal.
If you keep in
30
your mind
minutes
that
would
you're
be
trying
better.
to keep
30
it
minutes
short,
is great.
if you keep it in your mind that you're trying to keep it short, it'll be a perfect normal time.
That being
So-
said, if you do need further
Yeah.
elaboration on a question or an answer that they give, don't be afraid to ask for that elaboration. Just don't go down a rabbit hole of like bullshit. Essentially.
Please.
You got it.
All right, thanks y'all. And once again, great game to all of you.
That was fun.
This has been a phenomenal
Such a fun.
cast.
Yeah.
You were all able to verbalize the strengths and weaknesses very well, which is not something that always happens. And all of you were able to really set aside a lot of the personal matters that happened during the game. Even though it's not ever personal in the game, it is just a matter of, it's still hard to separate that sometimes because these are friends that you have made over the past 24 hours, 48 hours in this game. and it's really the only people you've seen. So that being said, it is hard to take rejection occasionally from the people you've been hanging out with. So thank you for being understanding with all of that, even if we shed some tears, did some other things during the day. It is perfectly okay. And thank y'all for making this a great season. Really, the cast makes a season, not the gameplay, not the twist, none of that. So thank you all once again, and Taylor will elaborate further, but we just want to thank you for your contribution.
That was a blast.
Yeah.
Good job, everyone. Proud of all of you.
Alright.
And there we have it. The finale is approaching quickly. Who do you want to see win? Let us know. See you next time on The Greenhouse, Season 4.